If you'd like to participate in the discussion or leave us feedback, you can contact us at levelupyourgamingpodcast@gmail.com or find us on Facebook at facebook.com/levelupyourgaming. If you like the content and want to hear more of the show, subscribing will ensure you don't miss an episode. New episodes come out almost every Wednesday. Also, please review, tell a friend about the podcast, or share with your gaming group. Now sit back and enjoy the episode. Welcome to the Level Up Gaming Podcast. My name is Aaron, and joining me once again I have Josh. Josh, how are you doing today?
It's been a week. We've had a little bit of rain here. I was worried that we weren't going to be able to record today.
Yeah, about half an hour before this, you're like, tornado sirens are going off. I'm like, great.
Yeah, tornado sirens went off. The power went out for a moment, and then I'm sitting here wondering if we're going to get to record, and then a transformer must have been pretty close, is making all sorts of terrible noises. But power's back up. Everything is connected. Nothing's on fire. I did get a lovely call from the power company letting me know that my power will be restored in about an hour. So they have no idea what's going on either.
Yes.
The lovely joys of technology. Everything's interconnected, and we have no idea how it works.
Yeah. Actually, that ties in well to our topic here today. But not knowing how it works is kind of part of the fun when you are running a sci-fi game. And so this is going to be the first of one of our many genre episodes here. And you had started writing some notes on it. So, Josh, what are your thoughts on a sci-fi game?
I thought it would be fun to talk about genre as a concept. So we talk about when we do our Let's Make a One Shots, how some of our stories can fit into pretty much any genre. We tend to go for fantasy because that's real classic in terms of tabletop RPGs, but there are tabletop games and stories that they sort of run the whole spectrum of different genres that are available. And one of the ones I haven't told a lot of stories in, but I really like, and I like hearing stories and playing stories in, is sci-fi. And sci-fi is not the same as space fantasy, and it's not this. It's enough different from modern to make it unique, or modern or like cyberpunk, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I think starting out with the distinction of what makes sci-fi different, what makes sci-fi unique, is really where we want to start when we're talking about a genre. Sci-fi uses technology that we currently don't have, or is like an extension of what we have raised to a certain limit, right? And I think just in general, if we're talking about far enough out sci-fi, we're talking about space. Do you agree?
Yes, usually sci-fi is run with the understanding that humans have evolved into space travel and also a level of colonization to other planets or interaction with other civilized.
So obviously that's different from a modern setting, which is, current tech or tech from 5 minutes in the future. And I don't know about you, but I've been mostly terrestrial my whole life. There is the whole concept of, is cyberpunk sci-fi? And I think cyberpunk is its own little unique aspect of a dystopian sci-fi. So you've got future tech. It's sometimes space-bound, but generally not multi-planet or space travel. And it's usually, heavy into the corporate greed and stuff like that. We can talk about cyberpunk another time. But I
I think
think,
that a lot of people would probably consider cyberpunk to be in the sci-fi genre. I know one of the ones that you are trying to separate here is the space fantasy, which is what you're
yes,
distinctly calling Star Wars in this case,
yes,
which
Star
a lot of
Wars
people
versus
might
Star
also
Trek.
be able to say that Star Wars might be in the sci-fi genre because technically it has sci-fi aspects to it, even though it's more wizards in space. But
Mhm.
it, for this conversation, we're going to be talking along more of the Star Trek style lines, is I believe what you're trying to go with here.
Yeah, I'm not going to say with space fantasy and sci-fi there are plenty of overlaps. Um, we talk about Star Trek as like a classic uh, sci-fi and not a space fantasy, but like you got DS9 had gods and prophets, and you have like Babylon 5 or Dune. These are also classic sci-fi stories, but they also have like prophecies and you know, beings from outside and you know, all sorts of crazy gods and stuff. I think if you are looking for sci-fi, uh, magic is just not a thing. And I think that's really where you want to start. You replace magic with technology and you give it rules, right? Right.
Yes, your technology is your quote unquote magic in that universe.
Yes. Um, Now, when we talk about sci-fi, like space fantasy and stuff like that, that's generally like epics. It's the hero's journey. It's, the growth of a person through heroic means to overcome blah 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 blah. Sci-fi generally is um, more allegorical in its nature. A lot of the stories that are told in the sci-fi genre are allegories. Now, for those of you who don't know what an allegory is, it's a story, it's a poem, it's a piece of artwork, whatever it is, that depicts uh, an event or actions or like something from your modern age in symbols, representing deep moral, political, or historical truth. So you take something you want to talk about and you stretch it and change it just enough so that you can tell it as an allegory, a story that is separate from the actual thing you that is going on. Sci-fi is wonderful for this. They did this a lot in early Star Trek. Um, they mimic the stories that were occurring at the day at the time that the show was out, and like made it abstract enough so that people didn't recognize it as that, but uh, as crystal clear as you could be like, oh, this is the bad side and this is the good side, like moral plays.
Mhm.
Um,
No, yeah, that makes again that gives some good rules about what we're trying to set here with the genre style that we're trying to define.
yeah. Um, like I had a couple examples. There's a episode from the original Star Trek, of course, um, called "Let That Be Your Last Battlefield." Let that be your last battlefield is classic Star Trek in the fact that the people, I mean, you've probably seen it. Their half the face is painted white and half the face is painted black. You seen that one? You recognize that?
No.
Eddie. Um, Half the people have it left white, right black, and the other have it right white, left black. And obviously, the ones that are righty lefties versus the ones that are lefty righties, they hate each other, and they fight and they fight and they fight. But they're they're basically the same people. They're genetically indistinguishable, and they're just destroying their own planet and killing each other over absolutely nothing but which side is which. And the whole point of it was it's an allegory for race conflict, right? That
Mhm.
ultimately it was pointless and just destroying themselves because they couldn't get along. And that's a sort of allegory that you want to be looking for when you're telling a sci-fi story.
Okay. Okay. Um, Now, I assume you run more sci-fi games than I have. I've incorporated elements of sci-fi into whatever game I'm doing. What are some allegories that you've used in your sci-fi games?
Um, I've done social and political issues. Um,
Okay.
so the fun part about sci-fi, I mean, this is the whole point of like Star Trek was that you go to a planet, and because the planet exists in a vacuum of space, it also exists in sort of its own little microcosm of I want to tell this story. And so you can go there and you've got ramped up whatever the problem is. So, so when you say like things like cyberpunk or sci-fi, absolutely, but it is a specific genre inside of that sci-fi. You could go to the cyberpunk planet where corporations have taken over, have poisoned the planet, and people are living in squalor except for those that living in extreme wealth. That's very cyberpunk, but also because you're just arriving there and seeing this terrible thing happen, you are sitting, you know, in the moral seat of should we let this continue, that you'd get from a classic sci-fi story.
Hmm.
Um, so politics are a big thing. You can be like what extremism does to a place.
Hmm.
They've done. I've seen stories about like climate change. I've seen
Hmm.
stories about um, uh, like corporate greed, obviously. But then you've got your religious stories about different religions fighting each other over what um, prophecies that while they don't actually come to pass, they are held in such regard because of like stories that have been passed down. It's sort of like a uh, not that religion's bad, but blind faith without realizing the consequences of actions, sort of thing. And
Hmm.
that's an interesting story to tell. So yeah,
Would you
I
put
think
where would you put Warhammer in the sci-fi space fantasy game?
Warhammer. Okay, that's kind of space fantasy. There are like psychers. You've got the orcs that have the ability to, sort of believe in things and make them happen, especially as you get more and more in mass. But then you've also got the warp, which is just it's basically hell. You're passing through hell. Uh, and then you've got to, sacrifice. It's really space fantasy, which I might get a bunch of flack for, but like there's plenty of sci-fi rules in there. But once again, I said that there are overlaps and crossovers. Um, you can talk about there are stories in the Warhammer 40K universe that are like um, trade routes and working with, you know, you've got an oppressive government that controls the universe, and you're just trying to make a buck, and that's a great story. That's very enjoyable, and that has some of those same allegories of like, do you risk uh, breaking the law in such a totalitarian system because otherwise you're not going to survive? Or do you stick with the rules and let it slowly destroy your chances of living or, thriving? Those are those are fun stories to tell.
So, okay, so given that the allegories exist and all this, like, what would you say that the goal in a sci-fi game would generally be?
Okay. So if you're doing allegories, then the goal is to uh, give your players a moral quandary. Okay, give them a an ethical dilemma so that they can solve it and then move on to the next thing. Or that's the whole story. Is here's your ethical dilemma. Sci-fi games are really good for the one shot, you know, or like short little campaigns on a planet here or there. Stringing them together into longer things can be fine, but you're going to end up going more towards that hero's journey when you start stringing together longer campaigns. And that sort of takes it away from some of those classic allegorical sci-fi elements. So if we're talking about what's your end goal in a sci-fi story, it's give your players something to think about. You know, a moral situation, an allegory, and sort of just play with storytelling.
Okay. I just want to see kind of where you're setting the boundaries here. So what you would consider to be probably the most successful sci-fi game would be a shorter game or like a medium length game that you wrestle with a moral quandary. And
Yeah,
that if you go beyond that, you're probably then, although still running a sci-fi game, moving more into the space fantasy style genre, which is your characters probably are going through an overarching uh, transformation that's going to happen in the space fantasy thing, even though it is still a sci-fi game.
yeah. So you can do longer campaigns and stuff, but it really shines in those short little ones,
Mhm.
right? In like you've landed a planet, here's a moral quandary, figure it out. Um, you can have arcs, you can have longer stories. Um, maybe there is an oppressive government over a number of systems, and you've got to deal with like sort of finding the balance with that. Um, you
Yeah,
can
I feel
have
like with kind of the way that we're structuring what sci-fi game is and the moral quandaries, that if you don't eventually potentially migrate into more of the space fantasy side of things, even if there is no like magic or anything fantasy, uh, like fantasy like in the game, but it's more of that hero's journey throughout the way. If it's more open ended and not defined, it's just a bunch of different moral quandaries. You're sort of in like a sandbox game of
yeah,
like sci-fi.
yeah. You can do exploration sci-fi, but once again, exploration is like I'm traveling from planet to planet. Oh, look, I found a moral quandary. So uh, that's where you end up with that. I think what I want to talk about is setting the scene. You know, we talk about the stories. We talk about uh, that. What makes sci-fi sci-fi. But like, if you're going to be telling a sci-fi story, it's important to have a couple of rules in place for the universe so that your players know where they're at and how to interact with it, right?
Mhm.
Um, I think, as we've said before, the difference between sci-fi and space fantasy leads into more there is magic, right? Whereas sci-fi, the universe is structured and there are rules. There are specific technological rules on how things work. Either, hard science or like pseudoscience, but still science. Um, I think that you're going to have various governments, either local to a planet or to a star system or to, you know, a coalition of planets, whatever it is. And they're out there making and enforcing laws, space laws or local laws or whatever it is. I think that you need to have significantly advanced technology, right? But that all that technology has rules, and more importantly, that there are limits. You can't just have a do everything gun. You got to have rules. You got to have limits, and so that it makes it gives consequences, it gives limits, and it gives uh, a specific point where your players can struggle against.
Sci-fi is an interesting one because I feel like sci-fi and other space faring genres kind of you can skirt a lot of the moral scrupulous sort of thing where like your players can do some quite terrible things because the
Hmm.
law is kind of undefined within this boundary, like outside of the realm of like your conceptual understanding as players. So you talk about big governments trying to enforce space law. Well, you end up on some planet and, or you end up encountering a spaceship out in the middle of nowhere. And then you get into a fight, you blow it up. Like, or,
Yeah. Well, that's why you had things like Star Trek had the Prime Directive, or they had the rules that the Federation had. If you've got uh, something more like Firefly, okay,
Mhm.
Firefly, there was a big government. It was blah 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 blah, but there was like a code of honor that, yeah, you could do whatever you wanted, but that would make you a bad person. And
Mhm.
sure, we're breaking the law and we're killing people, but we're not those bad people. And there is sort of this having those rules, having that those limits in terms of what the players do allows for those moral quandaries. I think the only other thing that I recommend when you're setting a scene is slapping fancy words in front of normal things. You know?
Okay. What about in terms of setting scenes? Obviously, we're out in space. I don't know if this falls more into the space fantasy genre or not. What about like space creatures of
Oh,
sorts?
creatures? Yeah. Okay. So traditionally, humans are your generic race, but it doesn't need to be human. It could be whatever. It's a generic do anything race. I've also seen humans are space orcs in that other races are terrified of what humans can do. That's
Okay.
always an option. It's fun for a little bit of a story, but it's not. I don't know if you can make a whole campaign or a lot out of it. Um, you can have you take pretty much any fantasy race and you just make it non-magical and sort of like instead of there being a group of elves out in the woods, there is a planet of elves. And they don't have to be elves, with like high fantasy elves. They could be, I don't know, just creatures with longer lifespans, highly enforced, rigid rules, pointy ears, follows logic. You know, they're the Vulcans, space elves.
Um,
You can have orcs. You can have like a whole race of fairly disorganized, bumpy creatures that just want to fight all day and are obsessed with winning. And those are, there's your Klingons or whatever. And but you can also do uh like bugs. Bugs are always a fun one. You can do like jellyfish species or fish or
I mean, you got
giant.
Starship Troopers.
Yeah, yeah. Any animal or creature or crystalline entity you can think of, they're all open and exist in this universe. Um, they just need to follow laws of science rather than fantasy laws, right?
Mhm.
They're not magical creatures. They don't. They follow standard biological and physiological rules and sets. And as long as you're doing that, you're good. Um, you just make it its own civilization out there somewhere in the universe, and just figure what are they going to do?
Okay.
All right. There are um, a number of systems that are specifically designed to sci-fi that are not space fantasy.
Um, Besides the Star Trek system, and I guess yes, we're not considering Cyberpunk to be part of it. I mean, obviously, there's got to be like D20 systems. You could probably do, was it Cairn? You could probably do that as a sci-fi thing.
Yeah, there's D20 specifically for sci-fi. Um, there's the Star Trek. There's more than one Star Trek system, by the way. Um, there's also a tabletop game for The Expanse. I haven't seen The Expanse yet. It's on my list of you should probably watch this sometimes. I'll get to it. I've got only a billion TV shows to watch before I get there.
I think somebody mentioned The Expanse is quick.
I've heard it's great. There's also not one, but like 3 Firefly games. Only one of them is sci-fi. The other ones are just you're playing the TV show, and that's fine, but that's not a real system. So like there are ones based around IPs, but there's also Traveler. Traveler is been around for like 40 years or something, and it is one of your classic sci-fi systems. The actual in-universe map has like 1,000 planets and star systems or something. It's crazy. It's a huge thing. So there's a lot going on there. And apparently, I haven't run Traveler. I've got to pick it up and take a look at it. Apparently, the character creation is so specific you can actually kill off your character during character creation. I don't even know how that works. It sounds lots of fun.
Yeah, you say kill off your character while you're in character creation. To what end?
Backstory, I suppose. Like, oh, I killed that guy off. Oh, that must have been my friend who died during his character creation. It's about rules. It's about having, hard and fast rules about how things work, and you can't just magic your way through situations. It's technology, it's laws, moral quandaries, and just telling fun stories out there by a campfire in space.
In space, yeah. Or I mean, again, sci-fi doesn't necessarily have to happen within space. I know we're saying in space, but you can be a space-faring nation, and it can be a sci-fi game taking place on Earth or a inhabited planet. Like those are all things that can exist. So you can isolate it more. But again, at the end of the day, I think we've given some strong rules for what we're going to define as a sci-fi game and how to genre set for the game.
Yeah. And I think if you've got it doesn't matter what genre you're telling. If you set the rules for that genre and adhere to them, I think your players are going to have a fun time in that system. There are games that switch genres or move through different genres, but I think sci-fi is definitely one of the systems where your players will get the most out of it being a little bit more rigid, it having set rules in place and following them through from beginning to end.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. Besides that, Josh, do you have anything else you want to add to this topic here?
No, I mean, I just like I wrote down some dumb stuff here too. Quantum blender, a nano belt, the Einstein.
Yeah, these are classic sci-fi inventions. I mean, again, things that look in your house, identify an object that you use on a regular basis, and add some
sci-fi words to it. Yes. It just dumb stuff.
Proto blender. Okay.
the proto blender. Yeah. Anything could be anything. And as long as you set rules and laws and follow science or make up science about it, it seems pretty good. So, yeah, I think that would be a great way to tell a sci-fi story.
Love it. If you have thoughts on running a sci-fi story, or maybe things we've missed about the genre setting that we've kind of done here, or how you would maybe define a genre, let us know. Level Up Your Gaming Podcast at gmail.com or facebook.com/level up your gaming. The podcast is also on YouTube as well as all your favorite podcasting sites. So find it in your favorite medium, subscribe to it, smash the like button if it's on YouTube, leave comments, write a review, subscribe, all those good things. And that'll wrap us up for the week. So for Josh, I'm Aaron. Have a good week, everyone.
Bye.